Bueno, hola a todos, ¿me escuchan bien?
Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the third edition of the Uruguay Best Practices in Pharma Supply Chain, a major event of the sector in the region that features a cycle of webinars with outstanding experts from the industry. Today, we'll talk about validation of air routes. Please be aware of the fact that presentations will be in Spanish and we will have simultaneous interpretation. Please check at the bottom of your screen, press interpretation, and choose the language of your choice. And you can silence or mute the original floor channel. Well, this major event for the sector in the region will take the whole year. It's a cycle of webinars with international speakers from the industry. This initiative will attract more investment in Uruguay, and it is headed by the Uruguay Pharma Hub Group, integrated by international leading enterprises in the pharmaceutical industry with logistic and supply chain operations in Uruguay, together with a public sector represented by the National Agency for Promotion of Investment and Exports and the National Logistics Institute of Uruguay. We invite Mr. Alejandra Ferrari, and then the international manager of AstraZeneca's hub in Uruguay, Alejandra Silva, who will speak on behalf of the companies. First of all, Alejandro Ferrari. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the National Agency for the Promotion of Investment in Uruguay, we welcome you to this cycle, Uruguay Best Practices in Pharma Supply Chain. This is a trademark already. Once again, we have international leading experts, speakers, and we thank them for their participation and welcome them as well. This event is part of what Uruguay offers as a hub to do business in the regional distribution of pharmaceutical products. Our stability, the legal safety, and the fiscal incentives provided like free airport, free port, free trade areas, allow different companies to access other parts of the region. As a government agency, we play the role of promoting our country and also looking after how businesses develop and advance. We want this to be satisfactory for companies so they come here to do business and become more competitive. This is key for them, and that is why we share best practices and exchange across peers and with the suppliers in the chain. Finally, I would like to highlight that this virtual modality has advantages and disadvantages. Among the advantages, we can reach out to a vast audience and help executives from all around the region to participate. And we hope that other companies will shortly join us and enjoy the advantages of Uruguay as a hub. We have people from Mexico, Spain, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, Chile, and we welcome you all, also from the US. So we hope you enjoy this seminar today. Thank you, Alejandro. We now give the floor to Alejandra Silva. Good morning. I'm Alejandra Silva from AstraZeneca, And I am speaking on behalf of all the pharma group, all the pharmaceutical companies operating from Uruguay, from different platforms that have as an objective to share our best practices, not just across this group, but also with all the suppliers in the supply chain. The pandemics allowed us to see how important air transportation is. It's vital for all suppliers involved in this chain to understand the pharma requirements. It's also important to know that many companies are working together due to sustainability to move more maritime freight, but air transportation will never disappear, will always be needed, because there are urgencies all the time, and the chain has failures, and we have to make decisions and use air transportation, as was the case during the pandemic when we had to use vaccine doses all around the world. So sharing our best practices with airlines and airport terminals and all the many stakeholders involved in this change. Many are invisible though. So it's good to have Maria Jose and Karina with us today in order to continue sharing our knowledge. So that's all I have to say, and I give the floor back to Uruguay 21st. Thank you, Alejandra. Let me tell you that this webinar is being recorded, and the website of our organization will allow you to access the recordings, and you will find information about future activities. Today, we have the pleasure of having speakers from Uruguay and Spain who will share their expertise, best practices, and challenges in the process of validating air routes. We welcome Karina Sages-Dulan, who is the head of quality assurance, health, safety, and environment for the Uruguayan TCU, and Maria Jose Sanchez from Air Pharma Logistics Group. During the webinar, please mute your microphones, but at the end of this webinar, you will be able to raise questions through the chat or through the questions and answers button. We now invite Maria Jose Muñoz, who's a BA in pharmacy granted by the University of Barcelona. She has a master's degree in management from the business school in Dijon, France, and another MBA in the management of industries, pharmaceutical industries from the University of Barcelona. She worked for the Chemo Ibérica, and she works in Air Farm since 1998. She is currently the technical director of the Air Farm Depot in Barcelona, responsible for corporate quality assurance. The group has facilities in Barcelona, Madrid, Lyon, Basel, Montevideo, and Budapest. Air Farm is a freight forwarder specializing in the pharmaceutical sector. She will talk about the methodology to validate air routes. Maria Jose, you have the floor. Can you hear me well? Yes? Perfect. Well, thank you for this introduction. Thank you for this invitation to be part of this webinar. I'm going to share my presentation with you now. Can you see the screen? Not yet. Not yet. Now we can see the screen. All right. Thank you. Thank you for this invitation to be part of this webinar. I have a presentation on the validation of air routes, and I will start by briefly describing who we are. Air Farm is a freight forwarder founded in 1988. We specialize from the beginning in the chemical and pharmaceutical, cosmetic and veterinary sector. We do air, maritime and land transportation, and all our depots are GDP certified. Some are GMP. We are ISO 19000, 19001. In Europe, we have the authorized economic operator certification. We have a world coverage. We have our own facilities in Montevideo, Basel, Budapest, Barcelona, Madrid, Valencia, and Dubai. And we also belong to the Pharma Freight Agents Network with world coverage. These are GDP agents. We have an internal auditor that audits our activities, and we share the audit reports across all the participants. Since the GDPs appeared in 2013, we have been accommodating all our transportation processes to the standard. In the case of air transportation, we have been working in several different pillars like suppliers of air transportation, equipment to maintain temperature, and the validation itself of air transportation. During my presentation, I will try to explain each of the elements where we've been working. Regarding the qualification of air transportation companies, we have a program to validate them. This validation program includes a questionnaire for validation, which was specifically tailored to these companies. We requested documents on quality like certification, ISO, GDP, CEIV. This is a certificate issued by YATA. I will elaborate further at the end of my presentation. This is a certificate whose objective is to accommodate air transportation companies so that they commit GDP standards. During the validation program, we do auditing visits in site. These are face-to-face, and we also accept, when it's not possible to have it face-to-face, to do it remotely. We do an annual follow-up on the basis of quality indicators. Out of this validation program, the current situation we see could be highlighted as follows. As strong points, we have good cooperation, multinational companies with robust centralized quality systems. Most airlines have specific pharma programs to deal with pharmaceutical cargo. They are accommodating to GDP. They are getting certifications from GDP and private companies or CEIV Pharma from YATA. And in their handling depots, we have layouts that minimize exposure periods in areas that are not temperature controlled, and they deal with pharma products with special ramps or protected areas. We have thermal maps that show that these areas are being mapped and improved. As things to improve, I would highlight infrastructure inefficiencies, especially in the ramp areas where loading and unloading takes place. We also see that some areas with temperature control have small capacity. Incompatibility criteria regarding product segregation is not always aligned to what the pharmaceutical industry requires. There are limited stations that are arranged to commit to GDP standards. We also have to deal with the training of operators handling pharma products. And in the air sector, we have inefficiency in terms of compliance with reserves. And there are unexpected situations which create handicaps. Regarding equipment that allows us to control temperature, the necessary temperature. I'm not going to dwell into this because there was a recent webinar that dealt with this issue, but I will only mention that there are systems of active cold or passive cold, which are the isothermal boxes. We also have the pallet shippers to contain the volume of one pallet, and they have been adapted to the hold of an aircraft. We also have passive systems that are more advanced. These are systems that recharge as you go into special areas that required a change of temperature. So we increase the time of cold chain periods. We also see progress in monitoring of air transportation. We are used to data loggers that are dischargeable or multi-use. They measure humidity. There is also geolocation. And the news, the novelty is that the market is receiving geolocation data loggers that are dischargeable with an automatic airplane mode. So far, it was manual, and this was a handicap. We could not manipulate the data loggers inside the terminals. But now we are testing some data loggers with automatic airplane modality. They need to be approved by airlines, and you can consult data in the mobile itself or by receiving alarm signals. Regarding the risk analysis in the air transportation process, the objectives are, first of all, to evaluate potential risk of this transportation means and also determine control measures to mitigate risks detected so that we can reduce them to acceptable values. And all these control measures have been included in the validation protocol, and they are verified during the transportation validation. In order to do this risk analysis, we need good knowledge of the process and the agents involved. So air transportation is complex, and the pharmaceutical product will change hands very frequently. And in addition, this transportation includes stops. So risks are multiplied. The graph shows the areas of high risk in orange. Then we have the customs. The customs may pose complications that increase transit periods and length of such periods. And in the end, the pharma product may be exposed to higher temperatures. Another critical point is when the product is handled by the airline on land in the handling depots, as we said, in the ramp area, to be more specific. So as we do the risk analysis, the main points detected and studied are inadequate manipulation of the shipment, security or safety of the cargo, pilferage, theft, infrastructure of the airport, ramps, deterioration of the product caused by damage, bumps, dents, or exposure to temperature. On the other hand, temporary storage in origin or destination or stops along the way, and the intervention of customs. To mitigate all these risks, it is important to design the trade lanes. We need to select the supplier very carefully to take into account transit periods, the stops, the combination of transportation. Also bear in mind the peculiarities of destination points. There are countries where Friday is a holiday. So when you design the trade lane, bear this in mind. And then see whether you need protection systems, whether active or passive, due to the stability status you may have for that specific pharma product. And now, moving into the validation itself of transportation per se, I will explain the methodology we use in Air Farm. Air Farm, as I told you, is a freight forwarder. We are a service company. We don't have our own routes. And it was impossible for us to validate all the possibilities in terms of routes and all the many combinations. It was almost impossible. So we used a risk analysis approach. This validation process was divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 is a pre-selection of trade lanes, taking into account transportation conditions, whether maritime, land, or air, what level, and we take this into account. And then the impact on our business. What volume of cargo are we using? Then we incorporate critical elements like the profile of temperature in destination areas, duration of transportation and points of link, and we evaluate this with the risk ranking and filtering method. The main risk factors defined by our company are temperature profile, duration of transportation, and process points. We have added risk sub-factors like controlled temperature and ambience temperature, total duration, time of storage, number of points of link, number of types of transportation. All of this is classified and we allocate values to each sub-factor in terms of risk criteria. We allocate value. Our method allocates between 1 and 3 points. 3 is high risk, 1 is less risk. And we have studied each of these factors and sub-factors. All this classification is included in the documents that are available to all participants. I'll talk about this as an example. In the case of controlled temperature, if the route implies that the product is exposed to 20% of the transportation to uncontrolled temperature, that's high risk, and it's 3. If it's between 20 and 10, it's middle risk, and it would be 2. And if it were under 10%, it would be 1 less risk. For example, in the case of duration, if the duration of the route is over 48 hours, value is 3. If it is between 24 and 48 hours, 2, and under 24 hours, 1. It's less risk. And we give it 1 as a value, risk value. Well, we have comments for each case. In the end, we apply the formula of the risk ranking and filtering, and we obtain a table with all our routes classified according to the calculated risk probability. So these risk priorities are classified into 3 groups: class 1, class 2, class 3. Class 3 is the high risk, the worst case scenario. This would be the routes that are candidates to be validated. We have included another aspect, the freight forwarder. We have a list of freight forwarders that have been validated, but we know that not all of them offer the same quality level. So based on a risk criteria, we have classified our suppliers into A, B, and C according to the risk they're posed. So in the end, what we do is we crisscross our selection of worst case route with a worst case freight forwarder. And this would be the scenario that we will validate in the end. The validation consists on 3 shipments in summer and winter, and we do real shipments because during summer and winter we have short seasons and we don't have enough shipments. So we accept simulations as well in order to be able to be agile in this validation of transportation. Regarding aspects that we verify, on the one hand, we have the qualification of suppliers involved, how a shipment is prepared, traceability throughout the lane process. We also see that equipment involved, if we have land transportation associated or cold chambers or thermal boxes, we want this to be qualified equipment. We also check the integrity of the labels and packaging, and also monitoring of temperature should be correct and within the required limits. This would be our process to validate. And we do periodical revalidations following the same procedure. We have a few more tools which we use on a daily basis when we prepare our trade lanes. And these 2 additional tools are used when the customer so requires. One is the transportation card. This is something going from Montevideo to Barcelona, stopping at Madrid airport. This is the trade lane, which is then broken out into different phases. And in this case, it's a flight. And parts of the process, it's going to be impossible to commit with 2.8, and our cargo will be exposed to ambient temperature. So we have been talking with handling companies and air companies, and we evaluate the times when the product is outside the necessary limit of 2.8 degrees centigrade, and we allocate times. So in the end, we have an accumulation. At the end of the trip, the product will have been exposed X amount of hours to a different range of temperatures. So for 8 hours and a half, the product is outside the temperature and in ambient temperature. With this information, the lab will decide whether the pharmaceutical product has been protected or not, or whether it will need special packaging according to the stability studies we have conducted. We have another tool for lane assessment, which is a platform. We get a Pharma index. It's like a risk index of that specific trade lane. We estimate it for summer and for winter, taking into account the exposure temperature in origin and destination, the protection of this product. In the example, it's basic, maybe because the product does not require passive packaging and we have not hired active services. Then we include the level of quality of companies involved. We also include security measures at the airports involved, duration and complexity of the lane, depending on the transit and the stops. So this tool is very useful to compare. If we were to change the protection of the medical product. Instead of basic, we use an active system or a passive system. We could compare how this has varied, how this has improved, or how the level of risk has improved in this specific lane. Now, finally, I would like to mention the CEIV Pharma certificate, which is an international acknowledgement certificate issued by IATA, the International Association of Air Transportation, which guarantees that airlines involved in transporting the pharmaceutical product meets the good practice distribution requirements. This is done by IATA with auditors coming with expertise from the pharmaceutical industry, and they audit the companies that are part of this program. The current situation is that we have 330 completed certifications. Over 75 are in progress. They are being certified, and about 99 are under discussion with IATA in order to join the program. On the other hand, IATA has another tool in its web, which is called One Source. And this tool here registers all certified companies. This is a browser if you're looking for a specific company to check whether this company has the certificate or if it's in progress. And to conclude, let me tell you that the distribution of pharmaceutical products via air freight is one of the most important challenges for the pharmaceutical industry. It's a complex transportation, but very necessary. It's a sector we have verified collaborates, it's sensitive, and it's evolving in a very positive manner, responding to the needs of the pharmaceutical industry. I also want to tell you that the CEIV Pharma program of IATA contributes a very valid solution to adequate companies to GDP standards. This certificate we would like to see in the hands of other transportation means. So far my presentation. Thank you for your attention. And I think that the questions will come in a later period. So if you have questions, I will be happy to answer your questions later on. And this is my email in case you want to contact me personally. Thank you. Thank you, Maria Jose. I have a question that I received in the chat from Andres Colombo. He says, Maria Jose, if you validate a route with simulated in freight, would that be valid for any type of product? Would you trust the stability analysis, or should you include a sample? Best regards from Barcelona. Well, let me tell you, when we do generics, we are shipping products in a thermal box. But when we do concrete validations, we try to simulate as close to reality as possible. I cannot hear if you have comments or questions, please. Thank you. Let me remind you that you can use the chat for questions, both for Maria Jose and Karina, and they will answer your questions at the end of our presentations. We now move into the second presentation by Karina Saches-Dulan. She's a food engineer, graduated from the University of the Republic of Uruguay with an MBA from University Ort in Uruguay. She works in international pharmaceutical logistics, and she works in the area of planning, allocation, allocation of resources, follow-up actions, and regulatory management for the marketing of food and pharmaceutical products. She is currently head of Quality Assurance, Health, Safety and Environment, TCU, Uruguay. She will talk about how to minimize risks in the storage of pharmaceutical cargo. Good morning. Thank you for this invitation. I will complement the excellent presentation by Maria Jose, and I will now share my screen with you. I apologize. Let me start here. All right. Maria Jose was talking about CEIV program of YATA. To complement what she said, this program is quite recent. In 2015, YATA started with the first certifications. In the case of the cargo terminal of Uruguay, we decided to follow this trend, and we got certification in 2018. As Maria Jose said, this program takes all guidelines and recommendations of GDP and adapts them to the air transportation industry with all its peculiarities. This program helps tremendously for companies to analyze information and manage correctly all pharmaceutical products. I will mention the program that identifies cargo as life science cargo to differentiate between life sciences and perishable goods like flowers or beef or fish. The main difference is that one is liable to be perceived by senses if the cold chain is not respected, while science of life product is not so easily perceived by the senses. So we need to be very careful with this differentiation. In order to do so, YATA designed this label of identification, where we need to include certain characteristics. It's 10 centimeters per 10 centimeters, so you can identify it on the box. And it says that this product then is sensitive to time and temperature. And also it's a science of life. It's a life science product and requires certain conditions for transportation, plus 15, plus 30. And it should be in numbers. It's important to establish the symbols of plus and minus so as not to generate confusion. But we do not always receive cargo with such clear identification or with a single information. In this picture, you can see that we do have the label with the right dimensions and requirements. We understand this is cargo sensitive to time and temperature that requires a +2 +8 storage. However, it also has another label with a different range, -30, -16, and gives an indication in English that says, please freeze on arrival. So, sorry. I don't want to skip this picture. So this situation generates confusion. And whoever receives this package will hesitate, will have to decide, where do I store it? +2 +8 or a freezer -20? Therefore, it is important, and this is my message to you, there are risks when we do not identify cargo correctly. Maybe they are reusing a box, they did not remove the former labels, or the freight forwarder had one indication and the shipper did not inform correctly. And this is very confusing as a package. There may be many reasons, but undoubtedly, in transit or in final destination at the airport, this condition may lead to deviation of temperature and loss of product. On the other hand, we receive cargo with labels like this one. It says this parcel contains product requiring different storage temperature. So what do we do? It's in a language that is not universal. Numbers are universal. Numbers avoid confusion. But maybe some people cannot read this in English. Some countries can read in two languages, others cannot. It depends on the training of the staff in this front line. How do they interpret this? Will they interpret it correctly or not? Then in an airport, we do not open a container to manipulate cargo and make a difference on how things should be stored if it contains different pieces. So once again, we are faced with a situation where the cargo received has a confusing message for storage, and this may lead to errors in defining the conditions for storage. This is another example. Oftentimes, we receive cargo that is perishable. Oftentimes, we receive life science with a perishable label. So we need to understand the difference between life science and perishable goods. It identifies only life sciences. We cannot use that label for a perishable product that is not life science. Other situations that also generate confusion and mistakes when making decisions about storage of cargo. The image shows the correct label with the right dimensions, time and temperature sensitive, but it does not determine the range of storage. It's incomplete information. And this may generate other types of risk. Another example of what I'm saying here, the color is important when you print. A color identifies visually. In a terminal, most cargo we receive uses cardboard. So it's a brown box or bundle. So you visualize, you identify the light blue color against the cardboard, and it's easy identification. And you do not make mistakes, and you do priority decisions. In this case, they are not using the blue label. This is a print in black and white. And in addition, they put the temperature 10 degrees Celsius. In GDP industry, the ranges for the preservation and storage of cargo that is time and exposure sensitive, time and temperature sensitive, is +8 or refrigeration temperature or control temperature between 15 and 25 or 15 and 30. And in the third place, freezer, under 18 degrees. 10 degrees as indication poses doubt because there is no predefined storage condition and we don't have infrastructure to comply with that range. So we have to decide, where do we store this so that the cargo is not damaged, or that shippers need to evaluate the stability associated to this part of the chain where it was not correctly stored. Therefore, it is important to use the correct identification with the correct information. always saying that this is life science product using the YATA CEIV program. I would say that most of the cargo we receive does not, 1% does not use this label, and we receive different indications on the cargo, 1% of the cargo. Sometimes they have thermometers printed or printed labels printed in the office in a printer and pasted on the cargo. There's a wide diversity of versions that do not contribute to minimizing mistakes, human mistakes, when trying to identify cargo for the right storage. So, what do we do? First, we do international certification of CEIV IATA to define procedures, to have a recurring training program. As Maria Jose said, this solves the area of staff being trained in best practices for handling life science products, and also to have continuous training. Every now and then we go over the concepts and we work on our mistakes to overcome and do continuous improvement of our job. This regarding the failures or mistakes in the right verification. Human eye is human error, and we need to have procedures that are clear. We have a team of quality assurance in operations with a good flow of communication. We talk about our doubts, and we always protect the product above all. And then on the other hand, sorry, I'm in my office and the phone is ringing. And also in terms of time, these products are time and temperature sensitive, and identification of temperature is critical where to store the cargo. Sorry, Karina apologizes for the telephone that's ringing in her office. And on the other hand, time. Exposure of the product for a long time to uncontrolled conditions. And this happens in most cases and cannot be avoided, especially at the ramp area in the airport. There, time and temperature sensitive products are in an area that is not controlled, the ramp. However, we have identified that after going from the ramp to the terminal, we need to reduce exposure to radiation, which is a factor that may generate a deviation of temperatures, though ambient temperature in our country is not so high. For example, a product that requires controlled conditions that are 1525, if I leave them exposed to radiation, to sun, even though in the country we don't have temperatures over 25 on that specific day, that position in the sun may reach values of 50, 60 degrees. So we need to be careful in terms of exposure and time of exposure during uncontrolled periods. They cannot be avoided when we transport air cargo from the ramp to the facility. And how do we prevent this? By generating like an area or apron to mitigate exposure to radiation or climate factors. On the other hand, during my presentation, I will talk about the fact that TCU, the cargo terminal, designed the TISCAR system. It's an import system that allows traceability of the cargo within the terminal. This system allows us to have 100% of the cargo received with traceability, when it arrived, when it was stored in the chamber, and it allows us to manage information using tools like the pre-warning and this pre-warning means that before receiving the cargo, before the air company tells the customs that the shipping documents are arriving with the cargo, the shipper or whoever represents it, the customs agent, can, knowing the cargo and the risks, can manage a pre-announcement. And this shipping document will require certain conditions to store the cargo. In this way, we minimize two risks: human error on the one hand, because the range of deposit is defined by the owner or the one who knows the risk of the product. And on the other hand, it generates a priority handling in terms of its storage. If I have shipping documents that were previously identified in terms of temperature because they are life science products, we have this priority of handling, and this goes before any other cargo. In this way, priority is determined, and it's not determined by human factor. And we minimize any risk in the interpretation of information. All right, another tool that the TISCAR system offers at TCU is that the shipper can visualize the condition of storage that the product is undergoing. For example, 6 bundles were imported. The shipper knows that they should be +8 +2 +8. And they consult and they verify the condition of the cargo. This prevents human error. And we minimize mistakes. If any mistake is detected, the product can be relocated through the relocation service that we have at TCU, and say, this cargo is not correctly stored. We need to